Hello folks, this is going to be Rome 2. I got cut off at Rome 1. I went over. I was going to start talking about slavery and society at Rome. This is very important. From the kingdom up to the empire, slavery was a big big factor of Roman life. They ran the factories, they ran the farms, they ran the bureaucracy. An emperor could have thousands of slaves, and they're the record keepers. They're just the people who took the census. They're the people who got the taxes or counted the taxes. It was very important to society. It was part of the structure of society. Without it, it just wouldn't have worked. And slavery is very much a common occurrence in ancient civilizations. And even when Christianity showed up, the original translation for the Lord was actually master. People who obeyed the God were his slaves. And Christianity supported slavery in the empire. Once you're talking about slaves, you're talking about cruelty and civilization, the Roman games, not just the Colosseum, but the circus where they actually had a lot of the horse racing. It was a big business. They brought in animals, they brought in food. The circus and the Colosseum had vendors, they rented out seats. The Colosseum had prostitutes. Ironically, the Colosseum did not have bathrooms, as far as we could tell. They had to really clean that thing out at the end of the day. People went to the games not just to be entertained. The games were propaganda. Politicians would pay a lot of money for the Colosseum to be used, for gladiators to be brought in. Foreign visitors would see hundreds of people killed, animals from all over the world, reenactments of historical events. It was very important. It was, I don't want to use TV and sports and everything, but it's a whole bunch of different things together. Analogies really don't work too well with this. Nero, by the way, just to let you know, was not a fan of the gladiatorial games. He thought it was barbaric. Now, the few cookbooks. The Romans loved their food and wine. There's nothing here. This is pretty much a direct translation. There's a few little chapters and stuff here talking about dining and all that. Myths and facts. This is a little better. It has chapters on daily menus and taverns and what people would eat if you're just a regular Roman, not just a rich person. And it has first-person accounts. And the irony is most of the recipes are actually in Latin and then translated into English. So if you know Latin, you could frankly read it and decide, well, they're not getting it right, or they're, some things you can't get. Ostrich heads are really not available anymore. And talking about Latin, you might not want to learn the language. It's a dead language. Nobody talks really in Latin anymore except the Roman Catholic Church. They do update it. I think they have, the latest edition has personal computers and miniskirts. But some words might escape you. Like I said, some of these books, they assume you know Latin. You could also go to Wikipedia. There's also Latin and English translations on the internet. Roman art and architecture. You might not be that interested in it. A lot of it did survive in Pompeii because it was buried in ash. Pompeii is the equivalent of Las Vegas and Roman Las Vegas. So a lot of the information we got there dealt with the upper class and the very lower class because, basically they're slaves. There's gladiators, private games. Gladiators would actually be hired out for parties. Not just in Pompeii, but also in Rome. I got this book actually in Rome. You can see the Colosseum. That would not show up until later after Nero almost burned it down. Well, he didn't burn it down. He got blamed for it. He was in Rome at the time. I have to point out in his defense, Rome had a lot of fires. You put that many people together and they're all cooking with oil and they're drinking wine. Somebody looks away, somebody tips something over, it goes into flame. They had major fires on a weekly or sometimes monthly basis, and depending on which way the wind went, you could have a lot of damage. There is the circus right over here. The circus actually held This is which hand? Right here. The circus actually held more people than the Colosseum. They're using the natural lay of the land to actually have built that. Most of that's actually hill under there. It's a wonderful construction. The races happen more daily than the gladiatorial games, which would be expensive and more major events, political or holidays. This is a really good book. It's an encyclopedia almost. You don't read it from front to back. It talks about coins. It talks about Latin. It talks about holidays. It talks about the gods. It talks about there's a section on the legions and where they're stationed and when they're formed and when they're disbanded. It gets into Roman names, modern names. It gets into weapons. It gets into fleets. It gets into monarchy. It gets into the different government officials. It gets into everything. And it's a wonderful source. Once again, if you're studying Rome, if you want to make a role-playing game, this is it. Now we're going to get into books that are still factual, but deliver these facts in weird ways. For example, here I have a book that is basically Ancient Rome on 5 deniers a day. It's a tour book based on the Rome of Nero. Where to shop, what sights to see, how much things cost, Latin phrases, for example. Excuse me. For example, let's see. Oh, these Romans are crazy. Show me the money. How much is that? That's too expensive. Watch what you buy. Give me back my money. Stuff like that. It gives you norms. It shows you what it looked like. They have other books in the series. One of them's about Athens. It's just a funny way to pass on the information. Legionary, Roman soldiers manual. What branches of the military you probably want to join, where they get stationed, how much they get paid, equipment. The gladiatorial, the sword was something they took from Spain, and it's called a gladius. And gladiators are named after that sword. This is actually more of a person who decided that he would figure out where Romans had their holidays. It's actually an interesting idea. He basically went there with his girlfriend, and they went to all the places and they found out the facts about Roman vacations, people, how the Romans went there, what they did, stuff like that. It's interesting because when you think about the Romans with all those slaves, especially the upper class, they had a lot of leisure time, allowed them to do a lot of artistic stuff, writing, planning. So it's very fascinating. Okay, we're getting to the fiction now. First Man in Rome, fascinating series, very thick. If you're into HBO Rome, this is the thing you want to get into. First few books actually happen before the events in this TV series, and she gets into everything. There is a glossary in the back that's almost as big as most novels. She makes it quite clear in this that the Romans, or at least the people in this one, are very much either defending the Republic or trying to take over the Republic. She makes it clear that they're culturalists. They're also sexist. Culturalist is a person who basically believes that as long as you have the same ideas and the same support of political or cultural ideas, that you're just like him. The Romans had emperors from Africa. The Romans have emperors from Spain. The Romans had slaves from Spain. The Romans had slaves from Africa. The Romans had slaves from Italy. It's not race issue. It's cultural. But once again, they were pretty sexist. Here we go. Imperium, which means power. This is a book, basically a fictional book based on Sirio. He was a defender of Rome. I think HBO's Rome makes him look a little cowardly, but he is a person who's dependent on the sword, and I think he did find violence a tad appalling, not just because personal pain to him or thought of him getting hurt, but I think he actually thought of the debates being more civilized, the laws being more civilized. Being a lawyer, he'd probably think that. Um, two books I'm going to suggest. Okay, Roman Blood. This is the beginning of a series. Mysteries. I think Agatha Christie. SPQR. Once again, what's on my shirt? Senate People of Rome. Uh, this is more of a James Bond thing. Drunk, womanizing, but he does solve mysteries. So this is more of a weekend. You're stuck in your house reading novels. It's raining outside. This is book, airplane. It's not. It goes pretty quickly actually, but both of them cover the same events. Slightly before what you'd call HBO's Rome, before Caesar actually takes over, and actually it gets really onto politics. Best part about historical novels, they can show history, books tell. And sometimes people need to be shown how things work. It's much easier. This one right here, Under the Eagle, is beginning of a series where the main characters are Roman legionnaires. I believe there's actually a movie someplace in the works someplace. It can get a little dry because he really does get excited about tactics and training and equipment, and you could get a little too involved in the day-to-day routines, minute-to-minute routines, but it's still something you want to get into if you like the military part of it. Yes, I'm showing you this. Good series. Gets into a lot of Roman culture and history, and it's just wonderful, especially for kids. And there's different languages, Spanish, French, so you can actually give this for anybody, and they can learn a new language while reading it. I'm not sure if it's in Latin. I never actually checked on that. City planning, Roman city planning, very good. Has a little story to it. This is a colony, and it's fantastic. Boys, girls, adults will love it. They have a DVD version, expands a little bit on the story. Brian Blessed is one of the voice actors. The author also has little host segments where he walks around Roman ruins and shows you how things would work. It is once again quite wonderful. It actually helps a lot to understand Roman cities. Ironically, Rome is one of the least Roman of Roman cities because it was organically grown. It just kind of grew by itself, while most other cities in the Empire and the Republic were planned out. Washington, D.C. is really a Roman city. New Orleans is a Roman city. Heavily influenced. Okay, HBO's Rome. We're going to get to it sooner or later. I thought it's very realistic. Some things are still kind of in the air. We don't know that much about Roman history in certain areas. Only about what people wrote, and that's a lot of political stuff and politics and propaganda. But I thought the Roman city wasn't dirty enough. 3 million people. 3 million people. There's a lot of dead people. They're getting cremated. There's graveyards surrounding the city. There's smoke. It wasn't dirty enough. There weren't dead bodies in the street, you know. So it was realistic, but not realistic enough. If you want to know more about fact versus fiction, History Makes Television right here. This is articles by historians and other people who, some of them dealt with the series, and they could tell you where it kind of went off by its own. Okay, so you'd want this. Talking about Rome and fiction and nonfiction. This talks about the movies, and it actually is very good. One of the movies you'd probably want to get actually would be, well, The Life of Brian. No, it's actually in here. Another one is Funny Thing Happened to Me on the Way in the Forum. Very funny, based on Roman humor, and the producers actually also did a lot on Roman daily life. Another movie you want to get, Fall of the Roman Empire. The remake is Gladiator. I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to start Rome 3 right after this.